When Mark and Lucy are invited to a luxurious private island by her wealthy client, it seems like the perfect getaway to escape their routine lives. But beneath the island's paradise facade lies a dark proposal that shatters their trust and exposes hidden cracks in their marriage. As Mark grapples with Lucy's hesitation to reject the offer outright, their relationship begins to unravel. In a desperate bid for control, Mark unleashes a calculated revenge that leaves no one unscathed, but the emotional cost spirals beyond anything he imagined. When the dust settles, the choices made will lead to a tragic, unexpected conclusion that asks the haunting question: can love survive betrayal, or does revenge always demand its due? This gripping tale of love, betrayal, and consequence will leave you questioning where loyalty ends and justice begins. The invitation arrived like an unexpected breeze on a sweltering day, offering a reprieve from the monotony of corporate life. A weekend on a private island, owned by one of the firm's wealthiest clients, William Fellows. The email was addressed to both Lucy and me, she, the charming customer ambassador who seemed to win everyone over with her infectious energy, I, Mark, the quiet IT manager who kept the company running behind the scenes. Lucy's excitement was palpable the moment she read the message. Her blue eyes lit up, her long blonde hair swaying as she twirled around the kitchen in delight. "Can you believe it, Mark? A private island. This is like something out of a movie." I nodded, trying to match her enthusiasm. "It's quite the perk," I said, although the idea of rubbing shoulders with the likes of William Fellows didn't thrill me. Lucy had been talking about him a lot lately. Too much. "He's really impressive," she continued, her tone slipping into admiration. "Mid-40s, incredibly fit, and just, magnetic. You know, like George Clooney but even more sophisticated." "Great," I muttered, forcing a smile. "I'll pack my best Hawaiian shirt." 2 weeks later, we were on a private charter plane heading toward the island. The aircraft exuded luxury, leather seats, champagne on ice, and attendants who seemed more like personal butlers than airline staff. Lucy was positively glowing, soaking up every second of the indulgence. When the island finally came into view, it was breathtaking. A crescent-shaped expanse of white sand encircling turquoise waters, with a sprawling estate nestled among lush greenery. As we landed, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider, a practical man dropped into a surreal world of wealth and privilege. William was waiting for us as we disembarked. He stood out even among the glamorous crowd, exuding an effortless confidence that made everyone else seem insignificant. He greeted each of us warmly, but his handshake lingered a little too long when he took Lucy's hand. She giggled in response, her cheeks flushing a shade that didn't sit well with me. "Mark," William said, turning to me. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the man behind the tech that keeps us running. Make yourselves at home, both of you." The next few hours were a blur of introductions and activities. Snorkeling, kayaking, and lounging by the pool were on the agenda, and free-flowing cocktails kept the mood buoyant. Lucy was in her element, mingling effortlessly with the other guests, while I found myself gravitating toward quieter corners, observing more than participating. That evening, we dined on the veranda overlooking the bay, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the table. The conversation was light, peppered with laughter and clinking glasses. Lucy sat next to William, her attention seemingly fixed on him. I felt an unease creeping in, but I brushed it off. She was just being friendly, I told myself. After dinner, as the guests dispersed, William approached me with a proposal. "Mark, may I have a word?" "Of course," I replied, following him to a secluded corner of the veranda. "I have a personal request," he began, his tone casual yet deliberate. "I'd like to spend the rest of the weekend with Lucy." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" He smiled, as though my confusion was endearing. "Let me clarify. I've grown quite fond of your wife during the time we've worked together. She's remarkable, truly. I'd like to propose an arrangement, purely consensual, of course." I'll transfer $100,000 to your joint account as a gesture of goodwill. The air felt like it had been sucked out of the room. You're serious? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Completely, he said, his expression calm and assured. This is a unique opportunity for all of us. Think of what you could do with that money, a better life for your family, financial security. It's a win-win. I wanted to punch him, to wipe that smug look off his face. But before I could respond, Lucy appeared, having overheard the tail end of the conversation. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock, or was it something else? William, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Can we talk about this later? Her words hit me harder than any punch ever could. She didn't immediately refuse him. She didn't laugh it off or call him insane. Instead, she left the door open, even if just a crack. I turned to her, my voice cold and sharp. Lucy, is this what you want? She avoided my gaze, her hands fidgeting nervously. Mark, it's not what it seems. Let's talk about this privately. Privately? I echoed, incredulous. He's offering to buy a weekend with you, Lucy. There's nothing private about that. William remained silent, watching us like a spectator at a play. His calm demeanor only fueled my anger. I felt like a character in a twisted game, and I was done playing. Keep your money, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. And keep her, too, if that's what she wants. Without waiting for a response, I walked away, leaving them both standing there under the glow of the veranda lights. The island's beauty suddenly felt like a cruel joke, its tranquility mocking the chaos brewing within me. I needed to get off this island, away from William, away from Lucy, and away from the life that was unraveling faster than I could comprehend. Back in the room, I threw my things into the suitcase with an urgency that bordered on desperation. The luxurious furnishings around me, a king-sized bed with crisp white linens, polished wooden floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the moonlit beach, felt suffocating. I couldn't stay another minute under William Fellowes' roof. Lucy arrived not long after, closing the door quietly behind her. Mark, she started, her voice measured, like she was trying to defuse a bomb. Can we just talk about this? I spun around, unable to contain the bitterness that had been festering since the veranda. Talk about what, Lucy? About how our client just tried to buy you? Or how you didn't immediately tell him to go to hell? Her cheeks flushed, whether from shame or anger, I couldn't tell. It's not like that, she insisted. You're twisting this into something it's not. Am I? I snapped. Because it sure seemed like you were considering his offer back there. Or am I just imagining things? Her silence was the confirmation I didn't want. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I didn't know how to respond, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. It was shocking. I needed time to process. Process? I echoed, incredulous. What's there to process, Lucy? Either you love me and respect our marriage, or you don't. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't have the capacity for sympathy at that moment. I finished packing and zipped the suitcase shut with a force that made her flinch. I'm leaving, I said, my tone final. If you want to stay and process, be my guest. Mark, wait, she pleaded, standing. Please don't do this. Let's just leave together and figure this out. I paused, considering her words. The idea of leaving her behind to spend the weekend with William was unbearable, but so was staying on the island, watching their interactions unfold. I grabbed my suitcase and walked past her toward the door. If you want to leave, Lucy, meet me at the dock in an hour. The silence as I walked out was deafening. The moment I stepped into the cool night air, the weight of the situation hit me like a tidal wave. My wife, the woman I had trusted implicitly, had hesitated when another man tried to buy her company. I didn't know what hurt more, William's audacity or Lucy's ambiguity. At the dock, I arranged for a boat to take me back to the mainland. The attendant looked surprised but didn't question me. As I waited, the waves lapped gently against the pier, their rhythm mocking the chaos inside my head. My phone buzzed, a message from Lucy. "I'm not coming. Let's talk when you're ready. Please, Mark." I stared at the screen, my grip tightening around the phone until my knuckles turned white. She wasn't coming. She had chosen to stay. The boat ride back to the mainland was a blur. The sea stretched endlessly around me, dark and unyielding, mirroring the void I felt inside. By the time I reached the harbor, the first rays of dawn were breaking through the horizon. Exhaustion pulled at me, but my mind wouldn't rest. I checked into a small hotel by the marina, the kind of place that offered anonymity rather than luxury. As I sank into the stiff mattress, I replayed the events of the past 24 hours. William's smirk, Lucy's hesitation, the gut-wrenching realization that my marriage was hanging by a thread, all of it swirled in my mind, refusing to let me sleep. Hours passed before I could bring myself to look at my phone. Messages from Lucy were waiting, each one more desperate than the last. "Mark, please, let's talk. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't want to lose you. Call me when you're ready." I left the island. I'm at my sister's. Can we meet? She had left the island. The realization brought a flicker of relief, but it was quickly overshadowed by the question that had been gnawing at me since William's proposal: why hadn't she immediately refused? I spent the next few days in a haze, alternating between anger and sadness. Lucy's calls went unanswered, her messages unread. I needed time to think, to figure out what I wanted. But as the days turned into a week, my anger began to morph into something more dangerous: resolve. When I finally returned home, Lucy was waiting for me. She looked worn, her usual radiance dimmed by guilt and worry. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I dropped my bag by the door and crossed my arms, leaning against the frame. "Then why did you hesitate, Lucy? Why didn't you shut him down the second he made that disgusting proposal?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she tried to find the words. "I don't know," she admitted. "It caught me off guard. I didn't want to ruin your career. I was thinking about us, about what that money could mean for our future." "Our future?" I scoffed. "You thought staying with him for a weekend was going to help our future?" "I wasn't going to do it," she cried, her voice breaking. "I swear, Mark. I made a mistake." A heavy silence filled the room. I wanted to believe her, to forgive her, but the doubt lingered. "You should have told him no, Lucy," I said finally. "And the fact that you didn't." "I didn't do anything," she interrupted. "You're punishing me for something I didn't even do." "That's the problem," I said, my voice cold. "I can't be with someone who even considered it." Her sobs filled the space as I grabbed my bag and headed upstairs. That night, I slept in the guest room, the gap between us growing wider with every passing moment. The days that followed were a strange limbo. Lucy and I existed under the same roof, but the connection we once had was fractured beyond recognition. Conversations were reduced to functional exchanges, the weight of unspoken words thick in the air. Every time I looked at her, all I could see was that moment on the veranda, her hesitation, her failure to choose me unequivocally. I threw myself into work, spending long hours at the office to avoid coming home. My team was busy with a major software rollout, and the constant demands of the project provided a welcome distraction. At least at work, things made sense. There were problems to solve, deadlines to meet, objectives to achieve. At home, there was only the hollow ache of a marriage on the verge of collapse. Lucy, too, seemed to retreat into her own world. She took on more assignments at the firm, traveling frequently and working late into the evenings. On the surface, it looked like we were both coping. But beneath the facade, we were unraveling. It was a Thursday night when I found the letter. I had stayed late at the office and returned home to an empty house. The lights were off, the silence oppressive. As I dropped my briefcase by the door, I noticed an envelope on the kitchen counter. My name was scrawled across it in Lucy's neat handwriting. I hesitated before picking it up, dreading what it might contain. With a deep breath, I opened the envelope and began to read. Mark. I don't know how else to reach you. You won't talk to me, and I can't blame you for that. But I need to say this. I need you to understand. What happened on that island was a wake-up call for me. Not just because of William's proposal, but because of my own reaction to it. I've spent every day since then questioning myself, wondering how I could have let it get that far. The truth is, I lost sight of what matters. I let myself be flattered by his attention, blinded by the allure of something new and exciting. But none of it meant anything. It was you, Mark. It's always been you. I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to fix that. But I want to try. I love you, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if you'll let me. Please, just give me the chance. Lucy. I folded the letter carefully, my hands trembling. Her words stirred something inside me, a flicker of hope, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of the love we once shared. But they couldn't erase what had happened. The doubt, the betrayal, the wounds still fresh and raw, they were all still there. A week later, Lucy was gone. She left for another work trip, and this time, I didn't ask when she'd be back. Part of me wanted her to stay away. Maybe her absence would give me the clarity I so desperately needed. Or maybe it would give me the courage to make a decision I wasn't ready to face. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It was a Saturday afternoon when the email arrived. The subject line caught my eye immediately, "Your wife and William Fellows." The sender was anonymous, the email address a jumble of letters and numbers. Suspicious, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the email to find a series of photos attached. Each one was a gut punch: Lucy and William at a private dinner, their heads bent close in conversation, Lucy laughing as William placed a hand on her arm, Lucy walking into a hotel lobby, William by her side. The final photo was the worst. It showed them in the doorway of a hotel room, William holding the door open while Lucy stepped inside. The timestamp was from 3 days ago, during her latest work trip. My hands shook as I scrolled through the images again, my stomach twisting into knots. The pain was excruciating, but it was the rage that took over. This wasn't just betrayal, it was confirmation. The very thing I had feared, the thing I had hoped against all odds wasn't true, was staring me in the face. When Lucy returned 2 days later, I was waiting. She walked through the door with her suitcase, looking surprised to see me home so early. "Mark," she said cautiously. "You're here." I stood, holding my phone in one hand and the letter in the other. "Explain this," I said, tossing the phone onto the coffee table where the incriminating photos were displayed. Her face drained of color as she picked up the phone, her hands trembling. "Mark, I can explain." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice cold and steady. "Don't lie to me, Lucy. Don't insult me with excuses." Tears welled in her eyes as she set the phone down. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice cracking. "I swear, Mark, it wasn't." "Wasn't what?" I demanded, my anger boiling over. "It wasn't cheating. It wasn't betrayal. You went into a hotel room with him, Lucy. What am I supposed to think?" She crumbled, sinking onto the couch as the tears streamed down her face. "I didn't sleep with him," she whispered. "I couldn't go through with it. I swear, Mark, I left before anything happened." "Do you expect me to believe that?" I shot back. "After everything, You want me to take your word for it? Her sobs filled the room, but I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. The walls I had built around my heart were too high, too fortified by the pain she had caused. I love you, she said, her voice desperate. I made a mistake, but I love you. Please, Mark. Don't give up on us. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything, and felt the crushing weight of the choice before me. Forgiveness or finality. A chance at reconciliation, or the end of everything we had built. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what to do. The days blurred into weeks, and though Lucy and I shared the same house, it felt like we were living on different planets. Her apologies had turned into silence, her once vibrant energy dulled by the constant weight of guilt. As for me, I couldn't shake the images from the email. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her stepping into that hotel room, William standing beside her, smirking like he had won. But life doesn't stop for heartbreak. Bills needed to be paid, errands ran, and our routines moved forward like clockwork. The silence between us grew heavier, filling the spaces where laughter and love used to live. I wanted to forgive her, or at least try. But every time I thought I might take a step toward her, the doubt crept back in, whispering that I would be a fool to trust her again. It was a cold November evening when the dam finally broke. Lucy came home late from work, her hair damp from the rain, her eyes red-rimmed from what I assumed was crying. She didn't say a word as she slipped off her coat and shoes, heading straight for the living room where I sat nursing a drink. "Mark," she said softly, standing in the doorway. Her voice was tentative, almost fearful. "Can we talk?" I set the glass down and looked at her, taking in her fragile appearance. "What's left to say, Lucy?" She stepped closer, her hands twisting nervously. "I can't keep living like this. We need to decide what we're going to do, if we're going to fix this or if we're going to, let go." Let go. The words came out sharper than I intended. "After everything you've done, you think you can just walk away and call it letting go?" She flinched but didn't back down. "I'm not walking away, Mark. I'm standing here, asking you to make a choice. Do you still love me? Can you ever forgive me?" The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream at her, to remind her of the pain she had caused, to make her feel every ounce of betrayal that had crushed me. But instead, I said nothing. The silence stretched on until Lucy finally turned away, her shoulders slumping. "I guess that's my answer," she whispered, her voice breaking. She walked toward the stairs, and I let her go, too angry, too broken to stop her. The next morning, I woke to an eerie stillness in the house. Normally, I could hear Lucy moving around, her footsteps light but deliberate as she prepared for the day. But today, there was nothing. No sound. No movement. "Lucy." I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. There was no response. A sense of unease settled over me as I climbed the stairs. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar, and when I pushed it open, my heart dropped. Lucy was lying on the bed, her body unnaturally still. On the nightstand was an empty bottle of pills and a note, folded neatly beside it. I rushed to her, shaking her shoulders, calling her name, but her skin was cold, her lips pale. The reality of what had happened hit me like a freight train, and I stumbled back, my legs giving out beneath me. Trembling, I reached for the note, my vision blurred by tears. "Mark. I'm sorry. I couldn't live with the pain anymore, yours or mine. I love you, and I never stopped. I hope someday you can find peace. Lucy." The words shattered me. All the anger, all the bitterness I had clung to vanished in an instant, replaced by an unbearable grief that consumed me entirely. I held the note to my chest and wept, my sobs echoing in the silence of the room. The funeral was a quiet affair, attended by a handful of family and friends. People offered their condolences, their whispered words of sympathy doing little to ease the crushing weight of guilt that had taken residence in my soul. I returned to an empty house that evening, the silence now a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I wandered through the rooms, each one filled with memories of her, her laughter, her warmth, her love. And now, her absence. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself going through her things, searching for some semblance of connection. In a box tucked away in the back of her closet, I found a collection of photos, letters, and keepsakes from our years together. Among them was a small envelope labeled for Mark. Inside was a letter she had written years ago, long before the island, long before William. Mark. If you're reading this, it means something has gone terribly wrong. I hope it hasn't, but if it has, I want you to know that you were my world. Every mistake I've ever made, every wrong turn, was never because I didn't love you. It was because I didn't know how to be enough, for you, for us, for myself. I hope you can forgive me. I hope you can find happiness again, even if it's without me. You deserve that. You always have. Love always. Lucy. I clutched the letter, the tears flowing freely. In that moment, I realized the truth I had been too blind to see. Lucy had been flawed, like all of us, but she had loved me with everything she had. And now she was gone, leaving behind a void that could never be filled. Years later, the memories of Lucy still haunt me. Her laughter, her smile, her touch, they are all ghosts that linger in the corners of my mind. I visit her grave often, bringing flowers and sitting in silence, talking to her as though she can hear me. Lucy, I whisper, tracing her name etched in stone. I forgive you. I just wish I could have told you while you were still here. The wind rustles the leaves around me, carrying with it the faintest echo of her voice, and for a brief moment, I feel her presence. But then it's gone, leaving me alone once more.